Welcome to Surrender School. The Gifts of Imperfection. Session 8. All right, everybody. I am so sorry I can't be here with you this week, but Joy was kind enough to record me so we can keep going with this book. I think we've got a pretty good momentum. So she is going to record me today, and then I believe Cher is going to be the one that's going to moderate the meeting for this session. So let's just dive right in. Okay, we're going to be covering 2 guideposts today. The first one is cultivating play and rest. And then the next one is cultivating calm and stillness. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is on the bottom of page 100 in the old and on mid 129 in the new version. We've got so much to do and so little time that the idea of spending time doing anything unrelated to the to-do list actually creates stress. We convince ourselves that playing is a waste of precious time. We even convince ourselves that sleep is a terrible use of our time. Again, I can feel guilty if I'm not being productive. I tend to have this little critical voice inside my head telling me that I'm being lazy because I'm not accomplishing something. That's a shame. The next thing I want to talk about is on the very top of page 101 in the old edition and on the bottom of page 129 in the new. She says, the opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. Respecting our biologically programmed need for play can transform work. It can bring back excitement and newness to our job. Play helps us deal with difficulties, provides a sense of expansiveness, promotes mastery of our craft, and is an essential part of the creative process. Most important, true play comes from our own inner needs and desires, is the only path to finding lasting joy and satisfaction in our work. In the long run, work does not work without play. The opposite of play is depression. Just wow. Just wow. Man. Next paragraph. What's shocking is the similarity between the biological need for play and the body's need for rest, a topic that also emerged as a major theme in wholehearted living. It seems that living and loving with our whole hearts requires us to respect our body's need for renewal. You know, I've been learning a lot about sleep lately. I've been trying to make sure that I get somewhere between 8 and 9 hours of sleep a night. Now, that's a lot of sleep. But it seems to be the magic point for my body. I spent probably most of my adult life getting about 5 hours of sleep, working on 5 hours of sleep, and feeling tired all the time. And we know the impact of tiredness on us from the standpoint of our addictions from the acronym HALT. We always have to be careful of hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And so I've really been trying to put sleep into my self-care regimen. I'm trying to practice radical self-care. And sleep has been part of that. And I think, after reading this stuff, I think play has to be part of that as well. Next thing I want to talk about is on the top of page 102 in the old version and on the top of page 131 in the new. If we want to live a wholehearted life, We have to become intentional about cultivating sleep and play, and about letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. I think the operative word is intentional here. Playing and sleeping, resting on purpose. And underlying that for me is believing that those things have value, that they are not wastes of time. They have value for my greater goals, and my greater, what I would consider my greater work. They are important for those things. They are not throwaways. And I know from my own history that whenever I'm stressed, whenever I'm under a deadline, whenever I'm pressured, self-care out the window first. It's the first thing I jettison whenever I'm under stress or under a time crunch. And I need to have more respect for the value of sleep and play and overall self-care in my life. Next, I want to talk about something on the bottom of page 103 in the old and the bottom of page 132 in the new version. What if we're normal and quiet and happy? Does that count? I guess the answer to this is only yes if it counts to us. If what matters to us is what we're concerned about, then play and rest is important. If it matters to us what other people think or say or value, then it's back to exhaustion and producing for self-worth. I am really working very hard on valuing my own opinion of myself over the opinions of other people. I'm working really, really hard on that. I have not operated that way for most of my life. And I either went off into perfectionism so that others would think well of me or well of the job that I did, or I flew under the radar and blended in with the wallpaper so no one noticed me so that I couldn't be criticized. And I really want to learn how to value my own self-opinion above anybody else's, period. That's what I'm trying to work on. All right, then the next thing I want to talk about is in the Dig Deep section. It's the bottom of 103 in the old and mid 103 in the new, where she says, make a list of the specific conditions that are in place when everything feels good in your life. Then check that list against your to-do list and your to-accomplish list. It might surprise you. To me, this sounds like a really interesting exercise to do, something interesting to journal on, because I have a very intricate, neurotic set of to-do lists for myself. I start every year making out what I'm going to accomplish for the entire year. Then I break that down by month. Okay, in January, I'm going to do this. In February, I'm going to do this, with the eye of my overall goals. Then I have a little notebook that I have weekly goals in that accomplish what my monthly goals are going to be. And then, of course, I make my everyday to-do list, my to-do list on my little schedule book for what I'm going to try and get done for the day. So I have a very neurotic system. And I will tell you that it's very rare when something that really makes me feel good gets into my list. I will tell you that my quiet time in the morning has made it onto my list. My walking meditation time with my higher power has made it onto my list. And occasionally I will put in a massage that gets put into my list. But that's it. And I would like to put more of those other things that go on when things are really feeling good to me, when I'm really feeling good, I would like to put more of those things into my daily schedule. They don't, I mean, one of the things that because I'm an addict and I have a lot of black and white thinking, that oh, I have to spend 3 hours on this. I don't. I can spend 15 minutes on this thing that makes me feel good and doesn't have any purpose. I don't have to make it take an entire afternoon. So I need to let myself think in those gray terms instead of the all or nothing kind of addict thinking that I tend to fall into. Okay, so that was guidepost 7, cultivating play and rest. Now we're going to move to guidepost 8, cultivating calm and stillness. All right, first thing I want to go over is on the top of page 106 in the old version or mid page 135 in the new version. I don't need to figure out a way to keep going with this level of anxiety. I need to figure out how to be less anxious. I used my research to formulate a plan to lessen my anxiety. The men and women I interviewed weren't anxiety-free or even anxiety averse. They were anxiety aware. They were committed to a way of living where anxiety was a reality, but not a lifestyle. They did this by cultivating calm and stillness in their lives and making these practices the norm. That first sentence, about needing to be figure out how to be less anxious or figure out how to get rid of anxiety, to be anxiety free. That was how I used to think about my life. And trying to eliminate anxiety completely from my life was gasoline on my disease. Anxiety is a reality, but not a lifestyle. I don't have to be ruled by my anxiety. I don't have to eat over my anxiety. I just have to take care of myself around my anxiety. And that's a really different way of looking at this stuff. I used to think that if I worked hard enough or figured it out well enough, I could figure out how to be anxiety free. And that's just never been true for me. And I'm retired. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is calm. It's the first paragraph under calm, mid page 106 or the bottom of page 135. I define calm as creating perspective and mindfulness while managing emotional reactivity. When I think about calm people, I think about people who can bring perspective to complicated situations and feel their feelings without reacting to heightened emotions like fear and anger. Managing emotional reactivity. That means being able to manage the emotions that come up and not to be overtaken by them. And, this sounds an awful lot like emotional sobriety to me. Not taking our emotions as facts, not taking them as the governing rules of our lives, but just taking them into account and managing them, not being ruled by them. I really like that definition of calm. Next, bottom of 106 or mid 136. I try to be slow to respond and quick to think. I also stay very mindful about the effect that calm has on an anxious person or situation. A panicked response produces more panic and more fear. I love that. Slow to respond and quick to think. This reminds me in program of the pause, that pause between stimulus and response, that pause where we bring our higher power into it between the first thought that says, I got to eat or I'm going to die, and whether we go and eat or not. We bring our higher power into that pause. So I thought that was really neat. Next thing is on the top of page 107 or on the bottom of page 136 in the new version. If we choose to heal with calm, we have to commit to practicing calm. Small things matter. For example, before we respond, we can count to 10 or give ourselves permission to say, I'm not sure. I need to think about this some more. It's also extremely effective to identify the emotions that are the most likely to spark your reactivity and then practice non-reactive responses. There's that word again, practice. So practicing non-reactive responses, and you can do that with your own abstinence, practicing how you're going to respond to a food thought, how you're going to respond to a craving, how you're going to respond to an invitation to your favorite binge-worthy restaurant. Practicing it beforehand so that you have some ready at hand tools to respond appropriately for yourself so you can keep your abstinence. You know, I know that sounds silly, but it's like having an emergency plan at the ready. The time to develop an emergency plan is not in the middle of an emergency. It's beforehand so that you know what you need to do to get through the emergency safely and abstinence intact. So I thought that that was some good advice from her. Next thing is that toward the bottom of page 107 or mid-page 137 in the new book. For me, breathing is the best place to start. Just taking a breath before I respond slows me down and immediately starts spreading calm. Breathing is a great place to start. And I'll tell you, you know, in some of my other kinds of readings that I do, I've learned about the way that Navy SEALs practice breathing. Now, those people get into some very, very gnarly situations but they're smart enough to know that their body responds in the way that it's going to respond to anxiety, and they know they need to deal with it. And they have specific types of breathing, like box breathing, that they do in order to decrease their arousal level so that they can focus on the situation at hand. Okay. We know when people are pointing guns at you and shooting at you, you need to be able to focus, and you can't let your anxiety get in the way. So they practice very specifically these kinds of breathing techniques to handle those kinds of situations. So breathing is not just a new agey thing to do. It's a physiological thing to do. It's something that can bring our anxiety down. Next thing I want to touch base on is on page 108 in the old book at the top, or the bottom of page 137 in the new edition. From meditation and prayer to regular periods of quiet reflection and alone time, men and women spoke about the necessity of quieting their bodies and minds as a way to feel less anxious and overwhelmed. I know meditation and prayer has helped me a lot. I never allow more important things to prevent me from my morning quiet time. It may shrink it down to 5 minutes, but it never eliminates it anymore. I always take it because I know that if I do that, I am starting with a few coins of resilience in my bank before I approach my day. And so I really have gotten a lot out of meditation and prayer. I mean, the big book is all about it. Our program is all about morning quiet time, evening quiet time, taking time, conscious contact with our higher power. Next, a little bit further down on page 108 or on mid-page 138 in the new book, here's the definition of stillness that emerged from the data. Stillness is not about focusing on nothingness. It's about creating a clearing. It's opening up an emotionally clutter-free space and allowing ourselves to feel and think and dream and question. Now, to think and daydream, that is very interesting on this stuff, kind of an unfocused thinking. And when I was preparing this and thinking about this particular part of the reading, it's kind of what I do in my two-way prayer. It's kind of the way I approach two-way prayer. I approach it by, I journal, I write down kind of what I'd like some guidance on from my higher power. And then I turn on meditation music and I listen. And that listening is stillness. It's a clutter-free space where I allow thoughts to enter that space. And then I work with my higher power on discerning, what is good guidance? What's that intuitive thought or that inspiration? So that's the way I kind of, interpreted what she was saying here with an eye toward program. The next is just the next paragraph, mid 108, bottom of 138. Once we can let go of our assumptions about what stillness is supposed to look like and find a way to create a clearing that works for us, we stand a better chance of opening ourselves up and confronting the next barrier to stillness, fear. And it can be big, big fear. Fear as a barrier to stillness. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I can see it. When I'm afraid, the last thing I want to do is be still. I'm usually running around like a maniac, doing a whole bunch of frenetic activity, trying to distract myself from whatever is making me fearful. So I think that is awesome that she put that so very clearly. Fear as a barrier to stillness. Next, on the very bottom of page 108 or mid-page 139, in addition to fear, another barrier that gets in the way of both stillness and calm is how we're raised to think about these practices. Parents and teachers scream, "Calm down and sit still," rather than actually modeling the behaviors they want to see. I mean, what were you taught about calm and stillness as a child? And what are you modeling for your kids and grandkids? The ability to kind of observe ourselves and see how we are acting, what we're actually doing with regard to calm and stillness is an interesting question. I am a fidgeter. I am a fidgeter from the get-go. I have always been fidgety. I have trouble sitting still. And so so really growing up, staying calm and sitting still was kind of like a punishment for me. And with my father, I mean, before he would blow, he would start screaming about sitting still and calming down and relaxing. Everybody relax, as he was getting more and more unrelaxed, right? So that's what was modeled for me. So it was interesting to kind of take a look at that and see what that meant for me. A little bit further down on page 109 or on page 139, in our increasingly complicated and anxious world, we need more time to do less and be less. When we first start cultivating calm and stillness in our lives, it can be difficult, especially when we realize how stress and anxiety define so much of our daily lives. As our practices become stronger, anxiety loses its hold, and we gain clarity about what we're doing, where we're going, and what holds true meaning for us. Now, I do try and cultivate calm and stillness every morning in my quiet time. And it is in this place, in that practice, where I have found true meaning and purpose for me. True meaning and purpose with how I am spending my time, how I am spending my life. I'm in the last third of my life, and I am so grateful that I have been able to find purpose and meaning there. It makes it so much richer and so much more beautiful, and quite frankly, fun to get up in the morning because of it. Next, in the I guess it's in the Get Inspired, under Dig Deep. It's going to be toward the bottom on page 109, or a third of the way down on page 140 for the new edition. Dr. Lerner explains that we all have patterned ways of managing anxiety. Some of us respond to anxiety by over-functioning, and others by under-functioning. Over-functioners tend to move quickly to advise, rescue, take over, micromanage, and get in other people's business rather than look inward. Under-functioners tend to get less competent under stress. They can get labeled as the irresponsible one, or the problem child, or the fragile one. Dr. Lerner explains that seeing these behaviors as patterned responses to anxiety rather than truths about who we are can help us understand that we can change. You know, I am definitely an over-functioner, but it was really interesting to think about seeing these behaviors as patterned responses to anxiety rather than truths about who I am as a person. I mean, wow, that is brilliant, because I tend to rate myself, oh, you were good today, or you were bad today. Now that I no longer do that on food, and whether I followed a food plan or not, then it's like how I behave, how I responded. And I think we can use this in our step 10s. Like, what are our patterns of behavior? It doesn't mean that we are bad people. It's just our patterns of behavior, and we can change those with the help of program and the help of our higher power. It's brilliant. I mean, it's really neat that we're able to do that. And again, I marvel at the wisdom of the 12 steps, because they have a way we can do all of this stuff. So that is all I have for today. I know there's a list of discussion questions, and I know Cher is going to help you guys walk through those. So I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming, and I will see you in the next week. Hopefully my talks at the retreat went well, and I look forward to seeing all of you again next week. Everyone have a fantastic week. Bye-bye. See you next week.